It's crazy that so you wake up and you started, I don't know, you start your day, and there was a blue aura that was following you.
Yeah, I just have this blue until this day. I still have the blue aura, like it comes and goes, like mostly right before I go to sleep or early in the morning.
Right. And
Um,
don't you think it's a being? Can you communicate with that aura?
I ask questions and I try to figure it out what it is,
Yeah.
and I I don't know. I just know I feel like my unconscious mind communicates to a planet. Like that's why this beam shoots out. The last time I really had that happen is when we were in Sedona. And remember Matthias was channeling on the rock? Like we
Yeah.
were just
Yeah.
um sitting there on the rock, and that's when that it was huge. The blue beam was shooting out of me, my third eye, but I don't want to like cause a scene. I don't want to say, "Oh my gosh, there's a blue beam shooting out from me." Like, and
Wow.
I'm sure Matthias hears a lot of stuff, and so I don't
Yeah.
want to like bother people, with, or I don't want people to think I'm trying to get attention or whatever. So I just try to keep the stuff to myself. Like I don't want people to think like, oh, she's trying to get attention, or
Oh,
I don't know. I
Merly,
guess
we
the
didn't
fear.
we didn't know we were there. We were all there already. Like our heads were exploding with the channeling that Matthias was was doing with this consciousness that was from not this planet, but not from other planets, something between planets. It was crazy, and there you were within the group, and you were having an amazing experience by yourself.
I know. I know. I guess I have to learn to share. Like I don't know what to say. Like
So, Merle Acton, thank you so much for joining a new episode of our Consciousness podcast. Really
thank
happy
you.
that you're here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm really, I have to tell you, I'm really excited for having you here because there's so many things that I want to ask you that I know that you've been going through. You have a huge transformation, a massive change in your life, and it's something that I think is very, very interesting to dig into. And some of the things. I'll first explain this to the audience. So I met Merle the last late on to 2023 on a US trip that I did, and she was there. But we weren't able really to connect that much on that trip. We
Mhm.
didn't have that opportunity to connect that much. But it was because we are joined in a chat group. I was kind of looking from the side that you were sharing some of the many things that were happening, very profound things that were happening to you in this past few months. And so I said, "Oh, Merle, I think well, I told you about the podcast, and you said." And I think I don't remember. I don't remember how it went. Did I invite you, or you said, "Well, maybe there's something that I can add or share"? But when we first had the first conversation, I said, "Wow, this is going to be great because you have so many interesting things to share." So very very excited.
Yeah, it was like, who's going to be the brave soul to volunteer?
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm like,
exactly.
yeah, it was all good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, definitely you have to be brave. But at the same time, I feel like there's something about the fact that when you start going through this consciousness path, this awakening, and all that, that you wanna, and not everyone is prepared, but like you
Mhm,
start feeling like you want to do some service in any way, shape, or form,
mhm,
and really be able to have the courage as you have to be able to share that story because we're gonna go through some things that they are kind of crazy, for some
uh,
for some for some
mhm.
individuals that are not really on in connection with this type of experiences, right? And so I mean, for you to volunteer, as you said, it's really great, and it's part of that service that I feel I'm partly doing like a little bit uh, myself, and definitely you're doing your part here. So I think it's all for the greater evolution.
Yeah, because my biggest fear is communication. Like I
Oh
don't want to
yeah,
get out there and communicate. So I'm trying to be
yeah.
brave and get out and tell my story.
Well, I
So I'm,
remember you told me that, and it was so funny because I had this. I had the same fear,
mhm.
communicating. Exposing myself.
Mhm.
But here I am. Here we are.
Here we are.
That's
So
if
true.
there's the fear. If it's the fear, then it's because that's the way to go, right? You know that better than me.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, Merle, why don't we start by you telling the audience what do you do for a living?
Right now, I was helping in some construction work, but I used to be a dog groomer. I worked with animals many years until my awakening
Hmm.
back in, let's see, 2021, when I had
Yeah.
to like leave my career. Like the voice came in to tell me to put the clipper down. And so then I started on this path. And so I just
And
been um, changing.
yeah, well, that's part of that huge change that we're going to talk about. The
Yeah.
other interesting fact that I learned from you the other day was that you live in a place that is kind of like heaven. Uh, what is the city you live in?
I live
I
in
don't remember.
Hiram, Utah, which is close to
Hiram,
Logan,
Utah,
Utah. Hmm.
which is a national reserve with mountains and lakes. It's
Hmm.
unbelievable. I saw the photos in Google, and it's like, wow, what a place. If you're not connected there, where else would you be connected? It's amazing.
True. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
kind of like an 2 hours from the Great Salt Lake or Salt Lake
yeah.
City.
And you live there since you were a child, or
No, I just happened to land here. Like,
uh,
let me see, probably a year and a half ago. I never
where are
thought I
you
would come.
originally from?
Wenatchee, Washington. Well, I was born
Oh,
in Arizona, and then
oh,
I lived in Washington State for 22 years, and then
oh,
I
okay.
started on this path, and now I'm in here in Utah.
Oh, nice, nice. All right. So well, you were getting started by, and I interrupted you. Sorry, explaining a little
Yeah.
bit about your story. You were a dog groomer,
Uh
right?
huh. Yeah. Hmm.
So that was what you used to do. That was your day job, standard day
Yeah.
job, and
I I had my own business grooming dogs
hmm, hmm,
for many years, and the story is, I started one day. I was washing dishes in the evening, and I heard this voice that called my name. And I'm thinking, like, who is this? Who's calling my name? And I just keep on washing dishes and not thinking much about it. And I go outside to throw the garbage out. And I look up and I see this big, beautiful full moon. And I'm
hmm,
looking at it thinking, oh, it's really beautiful tonight. And I see this geometric whale, like geometry type whale, come out of the moon and come down. And I'm like staring at it and I'm thinking, like, am I drinking? Like, is this normal? And
yeah.
it's like the grid lines. I could see like these purple lines in the sky. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm going a little bit crazy. And that kind of like started my path, as being like,
But you
what
were
is
you
this?
were you were by yourself at your
Yes.
house, or you were with other people? Okay.
Well, I had children sleeping in the
Yeah.
house, but I was just by
Yeah.
myself. But I thought I was kind of like going crazy there for a minute. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm just seeing things. And so I go back inside the house, and all of a sudden I'm hearing like owls outside, owls. And now I'm thinking at this point that I'm super crazy. Like, what's happening? And so you know how you like end up googling stuff online, like, oh, what's the
Yeah.
significance of an owl?
Yeah.
And I kept hearing or seeing on there that it was like a bad omen or something. And so I'm thinking at the time, oh shit, I might I'm in trouble. Like something bad is going to happen to me. And that night I went to sleep, and I was scared actually to go to sleep because I thought something was going to happen to me. And then like the next day when I woke up, I just had the voice like my contracts were up, and which led me on the path of searching for things. Like I had to investigate stuff, which led me to Gaia TV. And so I kept
Okay,
watching.
but before you go
Oh,
there,
okay.
because you just mentioned something very interesting. You
Okay.
said the boys said your contracts are up. So
Yes.
is it correct that to assume that it's saying your vital contracts are up? Which what
Well,
does that mean
I didn't know
for
what that
you?
meant. At the
Yeah.
time, I was like, contracts are up. I didn't know what contracts meant. It was just saying my contracts were up. And I'm thinking, like, what does that mean? Like, everything was so new, I had no idea. I just knew I was going through this massive change. And I guess that to this day, I'm still like learning about what was happening back then. And I'm understanding a little bit better now than
Yeah.
I
And do
did
you think
back then.
it's about the vital contracts, the contracts that you basically you agreed on, which is what is known is that before incarnating into Earth, you you basically agree on a specific contract, which will tell you when you were born, when are you going to die, what are the things that you want to experience on this planet, uh, and I guess some other key relevant information for you to be able to pursue that purpose, that mission of your soul. Is that basically what you think now is was that voice referring to?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I feel like that part of my life was over.
yeah.
My work, my home, and um, everything that my life was. And I thought I had a great life. I was just living life. I liked to party, go with friends, and work from home.
Yeah.
But with that waking up, it was like that part of me was done.
So, do you think it's because it's also something that I heard that you can change that, not you, but vital contracts can change, but it's rare that they change. I mean, it's not
Mhm.
common. I mean, it's like there. That's why there's a contract. But do you feel
Uh,
like it changed your contract, or it was like that was your contract for you to awaken very all of a suddenly, and now was the time? What do you think that I was referring to?
I feel like it was my contracts were up, is meaning like whatever I had to do in that time period was done. And now I have a new
New
contract.
contract.
Yeah, new
Okay.
contract or new path, whatever you want to call it. But
Okay. So because
yeah,
like I have millions of questions to go with that, because
okay.
even in that, and I know you have we have a lot of a great story afterwards, but do you have any before that? Did you have any other weird experience or strange or some dreams, or even were you getting into a life more, I don't know, aligned with consciousness or awakening or spirituality at all, or you were
I just I just know that as a child I spent a lot of time alone in the desert because I lived in Arizona, and I spent a lot of times out there. I'd find lizards and collect turtles, and I was just out there alone. Like my parents weren't around much; they worked a lot, and so as a child, I just like ran. I had the whole backyard, the whole desert, so I spent a
yeah,
lot of time out there, and I feel like I did a lot of connecting with animals and the planet. And then I guess later, somehow I just lost that connection through lifestyle and changes, beliefs. Um, I kind of grew up, my mom was Catholic, but she didn't really practice that. And then my dad was LDS or Mormon, but he didn't really practice much of it. So I had like a lot of different religious people in my family, like um, between Mormon, Catholic, Jehovah's Witness, Jewish. So it's kind of
mm,
like I got a little aspect of everything, but I always had my own beliefs.
yeah,
But I don't think after that, I just was living my life. I had no clue.
yeah,
Or maybe I did. I was just really sensitive and I didn't realize the things that I had, or the what do you call it, the sensitivity to other
yeah,
people or to animals. I thought that was normal. I didn't think that it was
yeah.
something different.
definitely was something unique. And what happened, Merle, after you woke up the other day, you were hearing the something about your vital contracts, they were up. What happened next?
Okay, well, after that, um, I had, I felt like I had to go research, like find information, like I was on a quest for knowledge. And so I just stopped working, like I couldn't work groom anymore. So I actually like closed down my business and I was just on the couch for, I don't know, like a month watching Gaia, everything I could. But at the same time, this is happening. Anytime during the day, I would be put to sleep. Like if I was driving and if it was 10 a.m., I would have to sleep or 2 p.m. And when I would be put to sleep, um, when I was waking up, all of a sudden, like in the lucid dreaming, like when you're waking up, I could see geometry, I could see pyramids. It was almost like something was being abstracted from me. And I started having this blue aura that like followed me everywhere.
Oh, really?
And then
Wow.
this blue light that would come from my third eye, which kind of was freaky at first. I'm like, what am I? Like, what's happening to me? But I would watch, anyway, I was watching Gaia and I'd watch like different programs on there. And that's when I came across the initiation with Matthias. And
Yeah.
I watched the first episode and I'm like, this guy's boring. Like, I can't watch it. So I skipped over, honestly. But later I went back and I started watching because I was like, okay, this could be, let me give it a chance. It could be interesting. By episode 3, then all of a sudden everything started to make sense. Like, I just binge watched it, like the whole thing.
Which is very crazy because initiation is the one that talks about explains each one of the dimensions, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
this is a initiation by Matias de Stefano for the ones who
Mm-hmm.
don't know him. These are it's a series in Gaia that has each episode I think is a dimension. So first, second, third dimension, fourth, and
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's just.
And yeah, and this guy is Matias, because people may not know them. But this guy Matias, he is one that remembers all his past lives and remembers not all of them, I guess, but many of them, and remembers what happens between lives. And some of those lives are out of this planet, and so he has experienced actual soul experience in different dimensions, because we live here in this planet in the third dimension, but other planets are in different dimensions. And so Gaia asked them to ask him to do this initiation series explaining all the dimensions. Um, yeah, which is, to be honest, to me it was kind of difficult, tricky to. I don't know. It was the first things that I saw Matthias. I think was that initiation, but it was tricky for me to get hooked, because it was kind of like it was hard for me to grasp what he was explaining, because
All the concepts, all
yeah,
his
yeah,
concepts. Well, that's
because he
why the
speaks
first
in
time.
all geometry, right? He speaks
Mhm.
in geometry. Everything is geometry, so it's hard.
Well, for some reason, all that made sense. The geometry, I think it's because I was seeing geometry. Like I
Yeah,
was seeing pyramids and I was seeing all these things. But again, I'm thinking I'm crazy at the time. Like, what is happening to me? But after watching all of that, I go to Facebook. I'm thinking like, okay, where's some more information? And that's when he had the trip to Egypt. And when I saw it on there, it said click to go to Egypt. I just clicked it. I knew I had to go. Like I had no questions to ask. I didn't know anybody on the trip.
yeah,
Um, I didn't care, I guess, how much it was. Like I just never checked. I was just like, I just knew
yeah,
I had to go to Egypt.
yeah,
And
yeah.
actually, my family was like shocked, and my friends, they're like, why are you going to Egypt? You don't know anybody. You're going to get kidnapped.
By that time, you already explained to your family what you were going through, and how long was that? How long did it pass since you left the day grooming business when you
It,
selected to go to the Egypt trip?
it was right after Egypt. So was Egypt was February of 2022, so it was right after I got back. Um,
That's when you quit
no,
the.
that's when I left, decided that I was gonna sell my house. I'm sorry, the fact that I had to shut down my business, that was
Yeah.
before Egypt, through my awakening process, was
Yeah,
being
and
like waking up.
how long? Sorry, just want to know how long did it went through since you first having start having these experiences, and you kind of get all this geometry and all that, up to the point when you were like you dive into Gaia and you and find Matthias, and then you decide I'm going to go to Egypt. How long did it pass? Just to have a rough estimate.
Um, it was in October, I don't know the exact date, it was
Yeah,
October of 2021
yeah,
is when I was seeing the whale coming out of the
okay,
sky and noticing that I can see the geometry or the grid lines in the sky,
yeah,
and then having all these like visions, like I could see myself in the Nile River, and the Sphinx, and just like different little pieces of. I don't want to call them visions because that sounds like it's way out there. So I just say segments or
yeah,
memories
yeah.
of different stuff that's happened.
Okay. So kind
Yeah.
of like maybe an year passed, and then, or maybe less than a year, and then that Egypt trip came across you, and you decided, I'm going.
hmm I
Yeah.
think
And did your family knew throughout that year what you were going through?
honestly, no. Like they noticed that I didn't want to work anymore. Like I was just living with my youngest daughter. My youngest daughter was living with me, so it was just me and her.
Hmm.
And so at that time, she was going to go stay with her dad for a while. Like we go back and forth where she stays. And so basically, it was me. Like, who was I going to tell what
Right.
was happening? I didn't know anybody that was going
Yeah.
through, and it was like my friends were falling off because I felt like we didn't have anything in common anymore.
Yeah.
And so I was just going through my process by myself, wondering why I'm being put to sleep. Why am I having this blue aura? Why am I connected to Matthias? Like, why, just all these things.
Wow, it's crazy. It's crazy that so you wake up and you started, I don't know, you start your day, and there was a blue aura that was following you.
Yeah, I just have this blue. Until this day, I still have the blue aura. Like, it comes and goes, like, mostly right before I go to sleep or early in the morning.
Right. And
Um,
don't you think it's a being? Can you communicate with that aura?
I ask questions and I try to figure it out what it is.
Yeah.
And I, I don't know. I just know, I feel like my unconscious mind communicates to a planet. Like that's why this beam shoots out. The last time I really had that happen is when we were in Sedona. And remember, Matthias was channeling on the rock? Like we
Yeah.
were just
Yeah.
um, sitting there on the rock. And that's when it was huge. The blue beam was shooting out of me, my third eye. But, I don't want to like cause a scene. I don't want to say, oh my gosh, there's a blue beam shooting out from me. Like, and
Wow.
I'm sure Matthias hears a lot of stuff, and so I don't
Yeah.
want to like bother people, or I don't want people to think I'm trying to get attention or whatever. So I just try to keep the stuff to myself. Like I don't want people to think like, oh, she's trying to get attention, or
Oh,
I don't know. I
Merle,
guess
we
the
didn't
fear.
we didn't know we were there. We were all there already. Like our heads were exploding with the channeling that Matthias was was doing with this consciousness that was from not this planet, but not from other planets, something between planets. It was crazy, and there you were within the group, and you were having an amazing experience by yourself.
I know. I know. I guess I have to learn to share. Like I don't know what to say. Like
Maybe others also had
some other stuff.
some other stuff. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. These are
it was the same one, like, right after Egypt too. I felt like I was seeing things about Argentina. It was almost like I feel like I was, like, helping co-create that somehow, but not sure. Like, the stuff that I see, um, I still question, but I just let it
yeah,
go.
yeah. So, but so Argentina when it was after Egypt, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So okay, tell me about Egypt, because that trip to Egypt must have been like wow, super crazy, because there you went to very sacred places. You went to the pyramids, inside the pyramids. Can you share something about that, or a lot?
Um, well, besides that, I didn't know what I was doing there, and I've never
Yeah.
meditated in my life, honestly. And when they send you like the program to like meditate and do these activities for your letter, because I was in BH emotional. Um, that's when stuff really started getting crazy. That's when I started seeing things, I would say.
Yeah.
uh, I thought I was like I would see the snake that would wrap around me, and of course my beliefs. I would think that it was, oh my gosh, it's the devil. Like I can't do this. I don't know why I'm going to Egypt. I don't know why I'm seeing these things. Um, but with faith, I just kept going with my path, and got to Egypt. And I felt like I didn't fit in, honestly, because I saw these great people and they had all these great gifts. And then it was just like me, like coming out of nowhere. Like people have been on the path for 20 years. They're telling me that, oh, I've been on the path and I was here and I did that. And then I just show up like from nowhere.
Yeah.
Like I used to party and drink, and all of a sudden I'm now doing meditation in the pyramids.
Yeah.
And so I kind of did fill out a place, but it was just like a learning process. Like I was just, it was more, at one point I thought I was summoned there. And, but then I had to sit with it. I'm like, oh, well, I'm grateful to be here. I just didn't know why I was there. Um,
Yeah.
but
And and did it happen, something happen like because that was Egypt was 22 of February of 2 months 2
mhm,
of 2020, right?
mhm.
And do you remember what was that trip about? What was the overall purpose of that trip from a Matthias perspective, who was the organizer?
Um, yeah, we were just like doing different activations, learning to, I guess, work with each other, different emotional, like combining emotion and spiritual and physical
Hmm. Yeah.
feelings or attributes together. So I honestly can't really even at the time tell you because I had no clue like what I
Yeah.
was doing. I was just going along with whatever they were telling me to do because my awakening process was so fast that I could barely keep up with anything. I was just like on the go mode, like, oh, we're going to be here. We're going to be here and doing these activities um,
Yeah.
until we got into the pyramid. And I felt like I was holding space in there. And I know a lot of people were seeing things, hearing things. Like we could hear people singing inside the pyramid when there wasn't really anybody singing in there, like between times. I know that when I reached the pyramid, I was crying, like I was going through some kind of emotional thing. So I
Yeah.
was bawling and I was trying to hold it so I didn't, like, nobody could hear me. But I was like, oh, crying so much. But
So you went inside the pyramid and you started hearing voices at some point, like people singing. You said
mhm, yeah.
while you guys were doing activation and meditation.
I think between time,
Hmm.
like we could hear things that were happening, but there was nobody in the chambers at the
Yeah.
time, and so we
Okay.
could hear a lot of stuff going on. Um,
I heard many crazy stories on that trip from many people that witnessed, because like in Argentina I was there in Capilla Monte. There was one specific date and time that we needed to enter the dome that represented all time and spaces. Uh,
mhm,
so there was a very specific, very powerful activation that you had to do there. In
mhm.
Egypt was the same. There was a specific date for some, like I would say the how can I put it, like
The
the
porthole, special. There was
yeah,
different times
there
and
was like
dates.
a special, no, I mean there was like a special activation, like the
Mhm,
in Argentina was that dome, but in Argentina, in Egypt, there was one special activation that had to happen, that you were all scheduled to get in to do that.
Yes.
Which was
Yes.
that?
Each time had a different letter, and I guess the letter was like the sound that we had to represent, or the vibration that we had to send. And so each time period, like at 2 a.m. or 1 a.m., represented a certain time and space
Yeah.
that we had to go in at a certain
And,
time.
and do you remember anything special that happened when you went there?
When I was there, when I was did my time in meditation, I remember as being, because sometimes you kind of zone out when you're meditating. So I felt like I was represented some kind of a priest, and I could see the priest, and it was singing. It wasn't me singing, but it was like this Egyptian priest humming our letter, and that's what I
Mm,
experienced, how I felt
yeah.
in that. And I
Okay.
know other people saw different things, but I felt that I was representing this priest that was singing
Yeah.
in there.
Well, beautiful, beautiful. And then you now Egypt's over, and then you went back, and what happened? You
Okay,
went
well,
back home, which is
I went back home from Egypt, and
yeah.
then again later on, I started again being put to sleep, seeing a lot of images flashing through. At nighttime, I could go outside and I could still see like the grid lines. Um,
So you see. So let me ask you about that. First, when you say you were put to sleep,
mhm.
by who you were put to sleep?
I guess maybe my higher self. I just would come over like really tired and
Hmm.
exhausted, and when I when I say put to sleep, I'd have to lay down and sleep, and then it's like I would start seeing pages like of books, like like somebody gets a book and goes like flips pages. Like I felt like stuff was being downloaded, and I couldn't. It was happening so fast that I couldn't read these pages. I just knew that these pages were coming in,
Wow.
and so I could see them. I don't know. I felt like stuff was being downloaded, and then at times I feel like when this light comes out of me, I feel like I'm giving information. So it's like I'm downloading stuff, and then information is flowing out. And
Wow.
then I started seeing like patterns, um, like I'm putting pieces together. Like I go somewhere, and it's like I don't know if you know what a constellation is. It's kind of
Yeah.
like um, like an energy. Like people represent different pieces
Yes.
of your life or whatever. So I would show up somewhere, and it was like I'm in a constellation. Like I could see the patterns, and then things would happen, and I'm like, what is this? Like I would start seeing, like like when you break a piece of glass and you see the
Yeah.
pieces of it, and I'm starting to see all the pieces of my life come in, all these patterns and things like that. And I still would think I was crazy
Yeah.
after all that. I'm like, what
Yeah.
is happening? And so,
And when you say that you started to see the grid lines, look at the sky and see the grid lines,
yeah,
uh,
purple lines, like they're
purple
grid.
lines,
Hmm.
the grid. And does that grid is the same as the one that Matthias talks a lot about the um, I know it in Spanish, dodecaedro. I don't know the words in English.
That
Icosaedro,
I say when
dodecaedro. Yeah. So
uh,
are those, or you don't know which? What are they from? Like,
I think they're the ley lines. What I'm seeing, like just the regular lines that cross, like the ley lines. I think that's what I see at
okay,
nighttime when I looked up at the sky. I mean, I go out there now and I don't see them, but in that period of time, I could see them. I could go out at nighttime, look up, and I would see all the, but they were
yeah.
purple lines in the sky. And
So you were vibrating at a very special frequency to be able to get to access that subtle realms and that type of
yeah,
information, I guess.
I guess so. At the time, since I didn't know what was happening
Hmm.
to me, so I was just going along. I was like, okay, I see this. What's
Yeah,
next? So I just kept
yeah.
going along wherever I felt I
And
had to go to.
and was that process also? joined by a lot of love or anything like that, or no, you were like feeling the life and feeling for each person the same way as before, like very standard,
Well, at one
or you
point,
were feeling like special love, kind of like more like fifth dimension type of thing.
I feel like the love that I had before has changed. It's almost like before I had condition on love, and now it's like I'm embodying whatever the universe needs me to be. Like people ask me like what are you? What do you do? Like um you're a psychic or you're a medium or whatever. um they seem to ask me what I am, and I'm like, well, I don't know what I am. I'm just whatever the universe needs me to be
Right.
um at the time. So it's like I don't really know exactly. I don't really put myself in a box and give myself a name. But anyway, what I was saying was the love is like I don't put conditions on it. So it's like this, it's a higher love
Hmm.
that I'm feeling.
Hmm.
It's being like it doesn't, how can I explain it? It's just this, I think, I don't know if it's 5D love or whatever you want to call it. If
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
such a
yeah.
thing, if there's
If
such a
there's such a
thing.
thing, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so it's like I love somebody or things, but it's their being. It's not because they're a male or female or whatever they do for work. It's just that I see more inside somebody, and it's like I love their spirit or attracted to their spirit more than their outside appearance,
Yeah.
if that
Okay.
makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Wow, amazing. And
Mhm.
so then, I mean, the trip from Argentina, which was, I think, a year after Egypt, right?
Mhm.
2023? No, 2022
It
was.
was in the same year, actually. It was in, was
I
it
was the same,
November?
but
Wasn't
it
it
was
Feb?
not. No, it was not 2020, right? It was
No, it was 2022 was Egypt.
2022
2022.
was Egypt. Yeah.
And it
Okay.
was in February, and I think we went in November to Argentina
Yeah. Yeah.
that same year.
And how did that happen? How did you ended up there?
Um, Well, that's I'll have to go back, is when I was being put to sleep again. Like I
Oh
say,
yeah.
put to sleep, getting tired. I kept seeing things. Like I saw myself, and I actually saw Matthias and like a circle of people. And I was like, oh, I guess we're going somewhere else. Like I knew it was a Latin country, but I didn't know it was Argentina. I just knew I was going somewhere else.
So you
And
were
so
dreaming
that,
about it.
yes, I was dreaming about it. And then all of a sudden it was like this trip to Argentina came up, and then it's like, oh, I have to go to it. So then I
Right.
signed up for that trip, and that was amazing. It was a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
For you
It's a
to
lot of
say that was a lot.
well, I had a lot of people give me messages. It seems like wherever I go, I have people coming and telling me messages. And sometimes I get irritated because I'm thinking, well, why can't I receive my own messages? Like, why do I need somebody else to tell me?
Right.
Um, I was like walking in Capilla de Monte looking at all the dogs. And since I used to groom dogs and I noticed that
Yeah.
there's a lot of dogs, I was looking and thinking, like, oh, these dogs need to be groomed. And sure enough, this lady comes up behind me, a friend of mine now, and she's like, oh, your guides want you to know that you won't be grooming dogs anymore. And I'm just
Oh
like thinking
no.
this. Yeah, I was thinking that I wanted to groom, and she's coming to tell me that I won't be grooming. It was just funny, the things
Wow.
that would come through,
She didn't
messages
know
that I,
you from she didn't know you from before, or she didn't know that you were a dog
a
groomer.
dog groomer. Yeah, no.
Wow,
So
amazing.
it was just a lot of stuff.
In those trips, we are so connected. It's amazing. It's like I always say, it's like you're connected. When I did those trips, like, and that's why it's hard then to come back, because you are so connected to the Wi-Fi there,
Mhm,
to that network, to the, to that net, to this, that those things, like you have more access to those synchronicities and or those type of things that happen to you. um,
mm,
it's like you're very connected, you're very sharp, you're yeah. And you're all connected with each other in the trip, like but it's not from a love way or anything like that. I mean,
No,
that, yes, but it's from like your mind. It's
mind.
unbelievable. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, because I feel like anytime Matthias does any activations, then I'm seeing like somehow part of that activation. And so I always worry. Like if I plan a vacation, like went to Mexico for Christmas and I knew he was going to go back to Egypt this last time. And so I'm thinking like I have to plan ahead because will I be put to sleep? And I don't want to be like booking an activity or spending time with people. And then I'm like, I'm sorry, but I got to go to sleep.
yeah.
So, so I'm always aware of what he's doing so that I don't do something that day,
Yeah.
take a day of rest.
So what do you think is the? Oh, hold on, before we get into this. So the dome. Now we're talking about the dome in Argentina, Capilla del
Hmm.
Monte, November 11th of November 2022.
Hmm.
um, Portal Day. What in that dome? Did you have any special, interesting experience?
In that dome. Um,
Or not necessarily?
Well, no, I don't think I can remember what happened. Like, I sat there and did my meditation and you kind of like zone out. And I know that we had a lot of rain afterwards, after that.
Oh, you
Um,
went the night of the storm. You went the actual
I
night of the
think,
storm.
yes, I was there, but I didn't get flooded. I heard the other group like had to go in there and there was like some water in it.
Yeah.
But when we had come out already and the next group got even more flooded or got rained out.
But it was, so you don't remember, because there was, I think that night there was one or two of those activations, group activation. I didn't go that night. I think it was the night before. That it was so intense what happened there. Like there was this Matthias channeling something very intense, um, heavy, and it was really joining the storm that came in. I mean, it was a huge storm that ended up destroying part of the stages of the Pueblo Encanto, which is where it was this
Mhm.
event. Um, I remember I remember I was with a friend of mine doing some meditations that night, uh, and just the two of us by ourselves, and she was able to connect, you know more like to other realms and
Mm.
dimensions, whatever. And I was like getting started with the meditations by that time, and I was joining her, and she would be like, when we did the meditation, when I opened my eyes, she told me, "Hey, you fall asleep. You fall asleep." Oh,
Mhm.
sorry, because it was late night.
Mhm.
Sorry, no, no. Listen, I was there in the meditation and I saw what was happening in the dome, and it's very intense. And I need to go back in the meditation to give support to Matthias.
Mhm.
So we went back again into the meditations. We were somewhere else, obviously, right?
Mhm.
But she was doing something like what you were sharing. She was helping Matthias on her task, on her mission, to support that, sustain that energy,
Mhm.
and help him on that task. But from a quantum level, I would think, it's from another. It's obviously, it's not the matter. It's not the physical time and space. It's a different
Mhm.
thing. Yeah.
I think my understanding was like sometimes when you go into meditation, sometimes you have to reach the lower frequency, and if you go to the lower frequency or higher frequency, it has to come back down. So if you get to a high frequency, of course the wave comes down, and so it gets dense, lower
Uh,
frequency, and so you get that, then it's more heavy, and so
yeah.
you got to like kind of do another go back up. So I think
Yeah.
one of I'm understanding that one of the meditations was really high frequency, and so
Mm.
the next one came down to a low frequency, and that's when it was like
Ah.
really dense
Ah.
energy
Yeah.
there. And
Okay.
so that was my understanding of it.
Yeah. So, what do you think, Merle, all this path that took you from the day that you saw the whale in the sky up to after Argentina, up to Argentina? What do you think it meant to you? What did it? What was the use of that for you? Like, what,
Um, well, I changed a lot, and I feel that um, it's meant to me. I feel like I've been on a love story. Like I feel like I'm in a love story. So I don't know if it's finding love for myself through this whole path, but that's how I feel that my awakening process happened was um, is like a love story. I'm
and it's
trying to find.
something.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Sorry.
go. No, no, no. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. Yeah, a love story of myself, finding myself
Yeah.
in this path.
And do you think it's something that it was meant to happen to you for your own growth, and that's it, or it was something that was meant to happen to you because you have a mission, you have a purpose in this planet, in this life, that you need that information, you need that experience to happen to you?
I think both. I think I do have some purpose on helping raising the consciousness of the planet. Um, I feel like I'm very connected to the earth. Like
Hmm.
of course, this is another story. When I go through the process, that I was saw that I was the universe, and then it was I moved to being the sun, and then I was the moon, and now for some reason I'm being the planet Venus. So it's like I change different planets,
Wow,
which
wow,
that's
hold on. Talk to me about that. What do you mean? You are the universe, and now you're Venus. Okay, tell me. Give me more info.
okay. Well, one time
Yeah.
when I was having my visions or seeing things, I kept being taken out of the planet and looking down at the earth, and I saw that I was water, like I was in the ocean, and I
Well, you were
saw that
dreaming, right? But you were dreaming, but you
the,
were slept or
no,
awakened.
I would just see things. Like I would be sitting here, and all of a sudden, I would see flashes in my head, and it's like with one word is connected to a lot of words. So like whatever was downloaded, it has like a
Yeah.
lot of words for some reason.
Okay.
So I was seeing that I was the planet, and um, I saw that I was water, like I was in this cave and I was splashing around in there. And I went through all the levels, like water. I was the earth. I saw I was a tree. I saw I was a bird, and I couldn't get it. I'm like, why am I being shown all this? Like, I didn't get it. And then one day it dawned on me, it hit me like, oh, I'm the universe. Like, like we can be taught to think that we're the universe or part of the
Yeah.
universe, but when you
Yeah.
actually see it, it's a different concept altogether.
Wow. Wow.
And so I was very connected to like the moon cycles and stuff. Like everything that was happening to the earth, it was like I was feeling it in my body. And I in my job when I was working in construction, I was told to like what do you call it when you poison the plants, like like they have the weed spray. Like I had to,
Hmm.
and so I was out there and I was feeling guilty about spraying and killing
Yeah.
these plants, and then all of a sudden it was like I was being seen, like I was this being spraying the lower beings, and then we have like higher beings like spraying us. Like this airplane went by and I was like seeing everything expanded, like, oh, I'm understanding, like I'm this poisoning, I'm probably getting poisoned from up here. Like I kept seeing all
Ah.
these different layers of the
Yeah.
universe, and that's when I started understanding that I was part of the universe. And then at one point it like flipped, and then I saw that I was the sun, and then the moon, and now Venus.
Now Venus.
Yeah, Venus.
And when you say for some reason, it's because it just comes to you. Like you
It
don't
just
know
comes to
why.
me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think it's like astrology changes that are happening, and like I'll get like tons of dreams about different situations and understandings. For And just like when I was a moon, I knew I was going to get a bunch of emotional stuff come
Yeah.
through. And now the Venus is more like passion and love. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm connected to that. I'll go through different cycles, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well,
Like I
wow.
don't have anybody to explain it all to me. Like I feel like I need some kind of a teacher to pop in and tell me like, "Hey, this is happening to you. Let's work on this."
Like a
But
Matthias.
yeah, like a Matthias. And so it's like I'm hoping that I'll have somebody that I can explain. At some point, I feel like nobody
Or
will understand
Patricia.
me.
Or Patricia that you know.
But oh,
Patricia Domingos. Yeah. Also.
yeah.
Well, there's many people there in those trips that might be able to help. But yeah, but it's kind of a each experience it's of on its own, is for our own. It's very personal, and so it's hard sometimes to be able to put the pieces together for someone else from your experience. You know,
Hmm.
it's like
Well, because it
it's your
happened so
story.
fast.
Yeah,
It happened so
yeah.
fast. Like I didn't have time to even learn anything. It's just coming in so fast, and I'm just here sitting with it and trying to put the pieces together.
And do you feel like this is worth it? Like you don't regret that this happened to you? You would prefer to be like you were your old self, or you prefer this new self?
I won't. I'm not gonna lie. In the beginning, I just wanted to be back to my old self because I was having fun. I had all these friends. I understood life. Well, I thought I understood life.
Yeah,
But as I've met people and I'm growing and understanding things, yeah, I'm really grateful to be part of this process
yeah. Okay.
of of helping the
So
planet.
yeah. So tell me a little bit about that then, about helping the planet and helping raise consciousness. So what do you do? What are your plans for the future in terms of helping raise consciousness?
Well, um,
If
I've taken a lot of courses because I'm like in this learning process. So it's like I've been doing um, DNA activations, which is kind of like a healing modality to raise your frequency on a cellular level. So I had this great teacher, Elizabeth Murr, which I went through a class like reading the Akashic records and past life therapy, like soul retrieval, and then the DNA. Also, I've taken some courses on access consciousness, and it kind of like defragments your system. And so I'm hoping to um, get that going and helping people with
yeah,
their elevating their consciousness. But mostly, I feel that I'm just waiting for there's going to be something else. Like it's wherever the universe puts me or
yeah,
what I need to be when I'm called to do it, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, definitely you are in a path that you will be able to learn what is it about as you go along.
Hmm. I guess
Yeah,
new things start opening up.
yeah. It's not time to put all the pieces together yet.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe.
I've learned to like detach from everything, like just be in the present
Yeah.
into whatever and have faith for whatever is happening next. But
Yeah.
which I'm excited. I'm excited. I mean, I don't know what the future is, but
Yeah.
whatever it is, I'll be here.
Yeah.
That's how I look
Well,
at it.
that is great. That is great. Really very interesting story, Merle. And thank you for open your your heart, your voice, share this with, because I know it takes a lot of courage.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah, and it was really
That's good.
a pleasure. So if anyone wants to contact you, um, maybe they are experiencing something similar to you, or they might be the one that might have some answers for you. um, so do you have like when you do these DNA activations and this type of therapies. Do you use an Instagram or something like that that you can share here?
I have an email.
Okay.
It's Mirle I am 1111
Okay.
dot gmail or gmail.com.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, or they can contact me through my phone number, but I can send that to you.
Yeah. Sure.
Um,
Okay.
I am starting a page soon, but like I said, I'm still a little bit shy from
Yeah.
putting myself out there. Like this right here is a big step for me. You don't even
I
know.
know. I know. Well, you did great. I mean, it was amazing the way you share everything that happened to you, and I know there's a lot of value for many people that are going through, even if there are different things, um, but experiencing something different from what we are used to. This is what this podcast is all about, to share that those experiences, and for other people to learn that some people around us, and it doesn't have to be like this super popular guru. Maybe it's your neighbor next door, is
Hmm.
going through things that are maybe similar to the ones that you're going in this new stage that we're in the planet.
Hmm.
um, this thing starts happening more and more. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Melly, thank you so much. All
Thank
right,
you. All
guys,
right.
see you in the next one.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.